Steven's back in the house. What's up, Steven?
What's cracking?
It's been a few weeks since we've had you on.
So long.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel that long.
Do you feel neglected?
You know what? Time is ripping by. So it feels like yesterday.
Yeah, you're busy every time. And part of it is like I see you every day, pretty much. But like you're always in the office with the door closed, with a client on the other end of the phone or the computer doing a lot of virtual sessions, which is awesome. Every time I go by, there's a new face kind of on that thing and you're taking them through the stuff. I think what a lot of people out from the outside looking in from a coach's life, that it may look cool. And it is. I mean, I'm not saying it isn't. You get to help people
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, it is very cool. You get to wear the uniform, get to spend the day in the gym every day.
I get to wear, I've been wearing shorts and a t-shirt as my uniform for years now, like 6-7 years.
Basically my whole life. I mean, there was a time actually where I had to wear a polo shirt.
Ooh.
Tucked in.
Oh yeah. I had a brief stop where I had to go polo tucked into like some
not so cool.
Some chinos or whatever. Yeah. Trousers.
Not such a cool thing, but it is cool to be able to help people and help them find solutions for their own personal challenges and see them have their successes. But part of doing that means having a lot of the same conversations over and over and over again. And that's just coaching. And sometimes it feels like we're doing that on the show sometimes because that's effectively what we're trying to do, which is help people by coaching them through the fundamentals and giving them a different perspective on how to look at things, or maybe some new information they didn't have. But the reality of it is, and we've talked about this before, there is no shortage of information out there. It's just how you get it and how you process it. And then more importantly, how you apply it with regard to health, fitness, all the things that we talk about on the show. But we gotten into a conversation the other day just about people's questions about, and it seems to come up when the weather gets warm, like, how do I speed up my metabolism? And it's usually rooted in, I'm trying to lose body fat. Like I want to lose weight / body fat. How do I speed this metabolism up? And we kind of went down this little conversation / rabbit hole the other day about the rabbit hole that people kind of take themselves down before they recognize they're very lost and they don't really understand the very basics of it. So, what are the key tips to, speeding up your metabolism, keeping it where you'd like it to be, which is helping you stay vibrant, healthy, active, and as lean as you possibly can so you can look great naked in the mirror.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so how do we do all that? Like, because those are just the questions that keep coming up. And I know the answers haven't changed, and obviously I'm asking this tongue in cheek, but I think there are some things that people could apply a little bit differently if they understood things a little bit differently in order to, quote unquote, speed up their metabolism.
Yeah, so I think some people, they're struggling to lose weight, and maybe I just have a slow metabolism. That can be a very easy thing to fall back on. And for some people, they may actually have, air quotes, a slow metabolism or a down-regulated metabolism.
That's a better way of looking at it. Yeah. Down-regulated.
Down-regulated, in layman's terms, maybe faster or slower.
Relative.
Yeah. You can think about it that way, but it's not exactly accurate. So, what metabolism is, first off, is basically how your body is converting the food you eat into energy that you use to keep your body operating. That is essentially, metabolism is a series of chemical reactions that take organic material that you stuff into your mouth and turn it into the stuff of life, the stuff of all bodily processes. So that would be, in its most basic form, what metabolism is. But when it comes to, how we apply metabolism to weight loss, it tends to be attached to the caloric burn, caloric expenditure. Yep. That's kind of what we when we talk about, I need to speed up my metabolism, we're usually talking about, how do I burn more calories faster? How do I do that?
Yeah, I think it goes one step further. It's like, and of the calories I'm burning, how do I make sure almost all of them are fat?
How do I
burn the most fat calories?
How do I speed the fat calorie burn?
Because burning fat calories means I lose fat, correct?
No.
Right.
Not exactly.
So a little fat burning zone chart on the step mill that's out front there in the gym, like that's not accurate.
It's color coded.
Yeah.
Well, we could. Yeah. That energy systems discussion could lead us down an entire completely other rabbit hole. But I think to start this discussion, or to kind of get the ball rolling and help create a framework that we can reference. It starts with your basal metabolic rate, understanding what basal metabolic rate, also known as resting metabolic rate, what that is, what that refers to, and also understanding what your total daily energy expenditure is, or your caloric expenditure each day.
Yeah. So there's going to be people listening to this go, yeah, I've heard this before. And, we've been talking about metabolism for a long time. I've heard BMR, I've heard RMR. What are those things? You just kind of, you talked about basal metabolic and resting metabolic rate. Some people will argue, and I think we're splitting hairs when we're talking about the two at the end of the day for the purposes of this conversation. Basal metabolic rate being the absolute bare minimum level of energy it would take to keep you basically alive in a coma, right? With almost zero brain activity or activity during the day, versus resting metabolic rate, which is you're not in a coma. So
you're just resting.
You're just right. You're sitting there laying in your bed, on a couch, watching TV. Maybe you get up to take a piss. You come back and you spend the rest of the day in bed. You don't eat anything. You don't do anything. You don't expend any physical energy. I think we're splitting hairs. So for anybody that caught what he said there and is already like, oh, they're not the same, shut up, because we're pretty much talking the same stuff. Yeah. If that's the kind of conversation we're going to have, then you're going to miss all the rest of the stuff. You're probably the person that needs this conversation.
Yeah, so. You're missing the point. So the way I describe it is, if you are sitting in a chair all day long doing absolutely nothing, the amount of caloric energy it takes to keep you breathing, to keep your heart functioning, to keep your brain operating, just to, like you said, to keep you alive with absolutely zero physical activity. Yep. That is resting metabolic rate, aka BMR. So just to put some numbers on it, like a typical female that I work with, their BMR may be somewhere in the range of 1,300 calories.
Okay, stop right there. So if that's her BMR and that's what she needs to basically just operate from a survival perspective, and and that number was 1,300.
1,300 is fairly typical, between 1,200 and 1,400 for women.
Yeah, we gotta take note of that, because oftentimes when we have people track their calories, particularly females, like how many calories you're eating. Oh, I don't know.
1,200. 1,200. That always is
It's always the number.
For men and women.
What's the reality of that, though, for women oftentimes when they come in?
That they have been under eating for a significant period of time.
It's like 900. And so you're not even getting close to meeting what would be considered your BMR or your RMR. In this case, let's just call it RMR. This is going to lead to more things in this conversation. That's why I just wanted to time you out on that. Take note of that, because it's the same for men too. You want to speed up your metabolism, lose fat, build muscle, whatever, and you're not even getting close to meeting your basic needs yet. So anyway, I digress. Sorry, I got off on this.
On the male side, that number may be 1,500, 1,700, somewhere in that range, again, depending on someone's stature.
Yeah. So what's it based on? What kind of makes it up? You said living or breathing, brain activity, things like that. What's the major component of that burns, that would push your RMR from 1,200 to 1,700?
Yeah. Basically, your stature, and the larger your stature, the more muscle mass you tend to have.
So you have higher energy needs.
Exactly. Yeah. The larger a person you are, or the more muscle mass you have, the higher your resting rate of calorie expenditure is.
Perfect.
So we'll definitely circle back to why that is an important point. But you can think of that then as your floor. As we talked about that, I say that's the amount of calories to keep the lights on. Just to keep the lights on.
Good. That's a good way of looking at it.
So that represents roughly 60 to 75% of someone's daily caloric expenditure. So that just by being alive, you're burning that many calories, and you're doing good. You're already expending some calories. And then we add in your exercise activity. So exercise activity is what people tend to equate with what my watch says, what my device says. I burned 476 calories in this workout. I'm trying to close my rings or whatever, that kind of thing. That exercise expenditure, I think we have a pretty good grasp of. I exercise, I burn calories. Where it gets a little bit more nebulous is when it comes to non-exercise activity. So you are still burning calories when you are just walking around, when you are doing errands, you're at the grocery store, you're walking around the house, you're as
activities of daily life.
Yeah, activities of daily life. As I'm moving my hands right now, I'm burning calories. So that is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis or non-exercise activity caloric expenditure. And then you have a fourth piece that is the thermic effect of food, which is a very small portion of your daily caloric expenditure.
Like how small?
Like 10% or less.
Yeah, so small.
Yeah, it's a fairly minimal, but it is there. And that is the amount of calories that you are burning when you are metabolizing the food that you're eating. Fun fact, you are burning more calories digesting protein than you are digesting carbohydrates or fats. So that's just another reason why protein is harped on again and again. So
harped on to consume.
To consume, yes. And so those four components, your basal metabolic rate, your exercise activity, your non-exercise activity, and your thermic effect of food, those numbers combined equal how many calories you're burning per day.
Right.
Make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I just want to go back to the majority of that calorie burning is coming from where?
From your basal metabolic rate.
Right. Going right back to the beginning. So you have to have a good understanding of this. You could be tracking all the other things, the activity on the actuated values that your watch kicks out at you, or the machine kicks out at you, or the calories that the Concept 2 rower or bike or skier or whatever is telling you, right? But the bottom line is the majority of the calories you'll ever burn in a single day.
Just from being alive.
Just from being you.
Yeah.
Just doing you.
Yeah. So if somebody is tracking their calorie burn, they're typically tracking their exercise activity, and maybe their device is doing something as far as their non-exercise activity. That's where we start to kind of lose a quantitative grasp on things. Is that non-exercise activity thermogenesis.
Yeah. So talk to me about this. So where are clients getting lost with this? Like why is this concept sort of fleeting for them in terms of the understanding piece?
So as far as like the non-exercise, that side of things. So let me see if I can try to unwind this. So based on a scenario that I typically find or that I typically encounter. So let's say it could be female or male, doesn't really matter, but let's just say it's that female that has that BMR of 1,300 calories and she's coming in and she would like to lose weight. As we do some tracking, we get a kind of a baseline understanding of her caloric intake, and let's say it's 1,200 calories a day. So that is that arbitrary number that
below the floor.
So we're currently in the basement. Her weight is stagnant though.
Yeah, she can't seem to lose weight no matter what she tries.
Yeah,
right?
She's continuing to exercise and exercise more and stagnant. Why is nothing changing? I'm eating less, I'm moving more. Why is this not working? So that question is usually the first question that we have to answer. So if calories in, calories out worked perfectly, this person that is eating below their basal metabolic rate, if they were to keep that up for enough period of time, they would starve to death. Obviously, if we look around our society, not many people look like they're starving to death. Quite the opposite. You can have someone who's eating under their BMR and yet they're still significantly overweight.
Wow. Well, how does that work?
How is that happening?
Right.
So, exactly. Especially if this person is exercising. So you can kind of think of it as your body trying to stretch a paycheck that is never going to be enough to cover all of the bills. So if you've been in that situation in your life before and you know that, okay, this is what I'm getting paid and this is what I got to pay out and the math ain't mathin'.
Indeed, I've been there.
So what are we going to cover first? Well, I got to keep a roof. I got to pay the rent, the mortgage, whatever. I got to eat. So, okay, I got rent and I got food covered. You can think about that as that's like your basal metabolic rate. And then you have all these other things, all these other areas of your budget where you're like, I gotta downregulate what I'm spending. I gotta pinch pennies, basically. And where your body is pinching pennies is in your non-exercise activity. Following so far?
Yeah, there is another way, and that is to take out a line of credit and run yourself even deeper into the hole, which that analogy you could draw a direct correlation to, but we'll come back in a sec.
Yeah, that is, I think, is what happens to people eventually. So, you're eating below your basal metabolic rate. I'm still exercising. So you're almost kind of forcing your body to expend calories or spend calories. And your body's like, we're running out of money here. We're getting down to our last pennies here. So we got to cut something. And what gets cut is your non-exercise activity. So whereas in your exercise activity, you're somewhat forcing a certain caloric burn, Your non-exercise activity is more of an unconscious caloric burn. And not your non-exercise activity where your body pinches pennies is in your movement outside of formal exercise. So this is in ways that you are most likely not going to notice.
Kind of unconscious of,
yeah,
right?
That right now I'm moving my hands all over the place. If I was in a down-regulated state metabolically, my hands would be resting. I would be moving my body around less. If you sit at a desk all day, maybe you get up and down from the desk less frequently. You're less fidgety. You're not walking around the house as much. All of that activity gets down-regulated and you become more sedentary outside of formal exercise in ways that you are not noticing.
Yeah, that makes really good sense. I think like if you called somebody's attention to it like you just did there, like if I was super undernourished or underfed, however you want to look at it.
Sitting very still.
If I'm underfed, then I'm undernourished. And if I'm undernourished, then I'm probably just I'm feeling shitty. Yeah, I'm feeling I don't want to do much. I mean, we've all felt that. We've all been there, right? Where our bodies are just you're wrecked, right? Mm-hmm. Versus the person that always seems to be on crack, or whatever on the other side. Or when you do have good energy for whatever the reasons are, you've got upregulation of something, and whether that's your metabolism or whether that's your adrenal glands or something like that, because you just, powered down 2 bangs in a row or something like that. Like, what that looks and feels like. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think but if you call somebody's attention to it, like when you're really hungry or you're really tired, like, are you more apt to move or not move? I think the answer is obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, when I get into that conversation with someone, maybe they begin to understand a little bit. And then you talked about the line of credit. That is when we are in this state where our income is not high enough, our caloric income is not high enough, and we're trying to make ends meet. So what do? We take out a credit card. And that is when someone is in this, this eating below their BMR or consistently under eating for a long period of time, we're basically building up credit card debt.
Yeah.
And then it's going to take even longer to get out of that debt for us to break even again. And we can talk about
let's talk about what happens. Yeah, let's talk about what happens there. I think that's important.
Analogy.
Yeah, we were just talking about finance the other day and building muscle. Yeah. Kind of relating muscle building to how you build finance, very similar in terms of principles.
Yeah.
So I like this one. But as we're going down here or down this road, we talk about this line of credit. The body functions a little bit differently than a bank account. Yeah. But at the same time, and it is very individual. Nothing is for certain, right? So, I think you said why the math isn't mathing.
Yeah.
Sometimes, a lot of the time that's just because this is very individual based. So it's based on your health history, especially or your current and past health history. It's based on your current exercise history and maybe what you're doing now. Other factors like your sleep could be also impacted by stress. Medications that you may be taking, supplements that you may be taking. There are a lot of factors here. But without getting lost in the weeds, on all that stuff, what we're talking about is this debt that occurs. You can kind of look at that in a couple different ways. You can look at that if that debt begins to pile up. One of the things you may encounter is recovery debt, right? And recovery from all of let's take the financial piece out of it and look at all the things that you do through the day, like your work, your general activities, and your exercise. You're creating debt. And what you've already said is you're a paycheck.
You don't have enough income. Yeah.
Cannot cover that. So this is where the body gets really interesting and starts doing things. Can you talk about that?
In terms of like the downregulation of kind of like metabolic processes is kind of what you're driving at.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you already said it. I was just kind of turning it back over to you to kind of cover it. Yeah, with regard to metabolic adaptation.
Yeah.
And downregulation of all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that to not get too, kind of lost in the weeds there. I mean, I think that downregulation of your non-exercise activity is one way that it happens. And then, there's going to be some like hormonal changes that are going to take place, which again, I don't want to get too lost in the hormone side of things because that I think is a whole other conversation that can be very complicated. But you may see, rises in things like cortisol. I think that would probably be the first thing that comes up when we're in this recovery debt is a chronically elevated level of cortisol.
Yeah, that decrease in insulin sensitivity is another thing.
Constant fight or flight.
Yeah. Those stress hormones go up. The insulin resistance goes down or goes up. There's a lot of things there. But to your point, let's not get lost in the weeds. We've talked a lot about that before. But if you understand that that's part of the debt process.
Yeah, that you could maybe think of that as your compounding interest. That's just making the situation worse and worse. You already, you have the line of credit that you're spending on, and then that interest starts kind of kicking in. And maybe that's a way that we could kind of think about it as that's how this situation goes from bad to worse. This is how it snowballs on people to the point that they're underwater.
Yeah, this is how I can only be eating 900 calories a day and still getting fatter.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually a very good, I think that's a very good way to think about it. Like, how am I getting deeper into debt when I'm eating nothing and exercising all the time? But I think the next question then is, okay, what do we do then? How do we get out of debt?
Yep.
Well, we're going to have to build you back up. We're going to have to increase your income is really what we're thinking about if we want to continue with that analogy. And as much as we would love income to drastically increase, it usually increases incrementally. So this is where something like a reverse diet comes into play. So if somebody comes to me in this state that we're talking about, in this state of debt, a reverse diet is usually the first thing that we're going to do.
Okay, time out on the reverse diet. I want to talk about this and explain this to people. But the bottom line is, if I have to increase my income, on the financial side of things, there's a few things I could likely do. I could increase the number of hours that I work, right? If I'm in a job like that, I could pick up additional shifts, right? There's a give and take to that. Because if I'm already working 60 hours a week and I have to pick up another 20 hours a week, there's obviously,
how am I going to do that?
There's a consequence to that, right? Something else is going to give. And is that enough, even still, to really cover the debt that you've created? And is it sustainable for you to do that? All right, if I had to do 2 weeks, 80-hour weeks instead of 60-hour weeks, no problem. I can do that. I'll be away from the kids. I might have to work the weekends, that kind of thing to make that up. I can do that. I'll make that sacrifice because it'll get me to here. I haven't gotten so far into this hole that I can't get myself out of. But that's not something I could do for months, on end. Like it would wreck so many things, right? So that's one way to do it, is to increase your hours.
Yeah.
The other way you could do it is by just reducing expenses, if possible.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a budget process here. That's not typically. I think people first go to the first thing first, like how do I make more money to cover this?
Yeah.
Let's just say this. There's a percentage of people that will go that direction, and then there will be a percentage of people who go, whoa, I need to do some budget control here. Yeah. Some people won't want to give up, right, what they have or what they presumably have, from a lifestyle or an asset, position or whatever else. And then there's other people who go, I have no problem. Let's get rid of this shit. Like I just saw a business owner the other day cut the internet out of his business. Like, I'm not paying. This is like an extra expense. We don't really need this. Not understanding the implications of that. They're broad sweeping. I mean, we do live in the 21st century. It was interesting. But anyway, my point, I digress. So there's a couple different ways to approach it. The human body is a little bit less forgiving and it's a little bit of a different operation here.
So I would say the taking on more hours, that would be sort of how a reverse diet may work in terms of you may be able to add calories quickly initially, but you're not going to be able to sustain that, or that's not going to work long term. So a more sustainable approach would be, how can I take on 5 extra hours? So again, let's not confuse our conversations here. How do I take on more calories? I do that incrementally. I do that gradually. So say someone has to bridge a gap of they've been eating 1,200 calories and their actual TDE is 2,100 calories. They have quite a gap to bridge there. They have, quite a bit of income to make up. How can we add 50 to 100 calories to your average intake each week? So that could, this process could take 8 to 12 weeks for you to gradually get back up to a true maintenance. If you try to do that faster, if you try to take on the 80 hours a week, what tends to happen is we gain body fat and we actually get further into the hole.
Yeah, so you could be, the goal here would be to be a little bit more conservative in your approach versus aggressive. Obviously, the more muscle mass you have on your frame, maybe the more aggressive you could get. The less down-regulated you are. I mean, I don't know if it's the right way to put that, but depending on how long you've been in this deficit, you've been in this hole for, that generally increases the amount of time you need to spend coming out of the hole. And something to consider, as you mentioned, like the reverse diet, there's also such thing as a recovery diet, which would be more appropriate for somebody that had a planned execution of getting into the debt with an understanding of how they were going to get out of it.
I'm going to get out of it fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's what we'll call a recovery diet, because they understand going in what they're going to have to do coming out versus the other people. And that probably happened over weeks to months versus the person that needs a reverse diet. This has been somebody that's been doing this for months to way more than it's like years. They're way deep into the hole. Yeah,
and I think that's how I interpreted what you were saying about like that 80-hour week. I don't know if that's what you were driving
at. That's exactly what I was looking at.
Yeah, that is more the recovery diet. Like I can do this very briefly because this was sort of a planned debt that I can make up fairly quickly. Whereas, someone who's, deep in the hole, it's going to be a more gradual process to get out of the hole. So trying to bring it all the way back. Okay, we're in this recovery diet, or rather this reverse diet process. What may happen during the reverse diet process? It's possible, but probably the least likely that you will lose body fat initially. So
that's what we want. That's the ultimate, right? That's exactly what we want. That's what
I'm going to eat more and lose body fat.
That sounds great. So that's the first thing that can happen. What else?
Which is, again, probably the least likely. A little more likely is that you gain some muscle mass at the same time as you're gaining some body fat as well. And then there's also the scenario where your body fat stays about the same and you just gain muscle mass.
So the first one is you feel great, you're doing the thing, you're dropping body fat and you're feeling awesome, right? Yeah. The second one is you're not actually gaining or losing weight, but your body composition is changing
in a positive way.
Yeah. And that can be a little bit tough because you're stepping on the scale and you're seeing like, hey, this really isn't changing. I'm doing all this work. However, what are some of the other, subjective things and objective things they might be seeing or
body
feeling?
Fat percentage is dropping.
You're seeing you're seeing some measurements or some data, some data change. You're also seeing or feeling like your clothes are fitting differently. Your energy is up. You are more fidgety during the day,
you
right?
Have more, the kind of vitality and
things are like you're going to bed at night and you're falling asleep and you're waking up in the morning and you're getting your day started and you're feeling a little bit charged up. Those are all things that are good things that are happening on this reverse diet process as you're starting to put more calories back in the system. And then the third one you said was we're gaining muscle. We're not really losing fat yet.
Yeah.
And the key word there being yet. It's just where we are in the process.
And I think that's a excellent foray into, okay, this is the process by which we are speeding up our metabolism or restarting our metabolism. But what is actually happening is that as we are kind of refeeding and we are recovering, hopefully we are also exercising, and now our body is responding in a more positive way to that exercise. We are building muscle mass. That is what I always try to focus on.
Regulating the anabolic signals.
Exactly. So we are, someone who's in a recovery diet, I'm like, okay, you're probably not going to lose weight. Maybe you will, but you might not, and you might actually gain weight. If this is, most people are like, I didn't come to see you to gain weight. I came to see you to lose weight.
No, I hear you. I heard what you said. Yeah. But you're wrong, because what you said was you want to lose body fat, right? We defined that when we started. And the only way for you to be able to do that in a healthy and a sustainable way is for you to gain some muscle first. And that means you're probably going to gain some weight.
Yep.
That's the conversion so tough to have.
Which can be a difficult conversation
to have. It needs to be set up at the beginning. It needs to be very, very clear at the beginning.
Yeah, these are the expectations for this process. But this recovery diet process, what I'd like you to try to focus on instead of being so fixated on the scale or losing body fat is building muscle. Because how do we increase our resting metabolic rate? Unless you're going to grow, unless you're going to become larger, building muscle mass is how we increase our resting metabolic rate. And that is how we increase the amount of calories we are burning at rest. And that is what speeding up your metabolism is.
Yeah, what's interesting, there's a few other things that kind of happen as this process is happening, correctly. And that is you're starting to put in, and we talked about this being a little bit more of a conservative process. Maybe we're adding in, another 50 to 150 calories a week kind of thing. And it's picking up. And for some people that can be a lot. Like they're freaking out. Like 50 calories is not a lot of calories, but, when you start to get into like the 150 or maybe 200 calories on a weekly, kind of a weekly ad, that ends up being quite a bit of calories for people kind of cumulatively. And they have a really bit of a tough time with it. And part of the thing that they have is like, God, it seems like so much food. And it's like they're literally having a tough time getting it in. Like, it's like, man, I just feel full all the time. I don't want to eat anymore. Yeah. So as a coach, one of the things that is music to my ears when somebody's on this reverse diet program or some type of a reverse diet of a protocol of some kind is, dude, I'm getting hungry. Good. Now we're moving in the right direction, right? Like it took everything I had to get down, that 1,300 calories, a week ago. And I just put down 1,450 today and I'm starving. Perfect.
Yeah. And what is happening as you're eating more? Probably that non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, that non-exercise activity, caloric expenditure is increasing in ways that you don't notice. You're burning more calories, you're moving more. And so all of a sudden, what was initially a lot of food, now you're moving more unbeknownst to you. And now that becomes a more appropriate amount of calories for you, or your body begins to signal like, hey, we're moving more, man, keep eating.
On top of the fact that now you're nourishing your body with the things that it needs. So I think it's really foolish, quite frankly, to think that if you're eating in the basement, as you put it, right, and you're clearly underfed, to not also recognize that you would be clearly undernourished.
Yeah, in terms of vitamins, minerals,
all of them, all
kinds
of the things,
of nutrients. Yes.
All of the nutrients, macros to micros. You simply do not have enough to perform the metabolic functions to get through the day, and your body is just downregulated everything as a means to find a way to do that. But as a means to the means to do that, it also says, well, we're just going to hold on to the things that we know are the energy sources that are going to work for us in the meantime, which is body fat, right? It's the most efficient source, or dense source of fuel that we could possibly have, and that's what your body does. And so you may be like even underweight and still be skinny fat because your body is going to be sourcing the fuel that it needs from other places. So again, if you're underfed, you're also undernourished. If you're undernourished and you expect things to be running in tip-top shape, that meaning your ability to exercise, right? Your ability to cognitively function throughout the day, be sharp, have a good sex drive. Yeah. I already mentioned the exercise piece, and ultimately lose body fat. You're foolish. It's just think about that. It's not that complicated. Again, but I also understand how easy it is to go like, I'm not losing weight. Makes sense. Eat less, move more, lose weight. No, doesn't work like that. It'll work like that for a while until it doesn't anymore. So anyway, again, sidetrack, but just keep that in mind. Like, it's really simple. It really isn't that complicated. The process to get through it can be a little bit complex though. And that's that in the nuance is what you're talking about here.
Yeah. That's kind of what we're driving at. CeCe, do you have some?
No, I was just sitting here listening and you're talking about like the process can be complex, but it's, I'm still kind of just sitting here thinking, why is it so hard for people when you have this conversation for it not to register in their brain with what you're saying? Because to me, it makes perfect sense what you're saying.
Well,
but yet,
we've been in this environment for a while.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it's an emotional response, and it's the conventional wisdom, if you will, which is not really wisdom, that gets in the way. Yeah. Right. Of the, my buddy did this, or I did this in the past. Yeah. Maybe you did do this in the past and it worked, but maybe you came in with way less debt to begin with. And so you had a lot more success. Maybe you came in with a much higher level of resiliency. You were much younger then, right? Your hormone profile was a lot different. You had way less liability. You had way less stress. You had way less things going on in your life. You had less body fat on your frame at that time, right? Yeah. Excess body fat will absolutely impact your ability to lose body fat, right? From a hormonal perspective. So we have to get that down, and you'll notice, how much easier it is to lose body fat when you're not carrying a bunch of body fat, right? There's a
tipping point.
There is a tipping point where having, a good deal of that makes it tougher for you to actually lose it. There's no little dude in there with a lever. I've said this a million times. Says once you start exercising and dieting, he just flips the lever and goes straight to body fat, take it off. Yeah. Doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So this is, I encounter this situation all the time. And, for some people, this recovery diet process, we never actually truly get up to what I would think is a true maintenance, just because there is this like a psychological block.
There's a barrier
when it comes to, I can't possibly eat that much. That's going to make me gain weight. And
sometimes it does to start.
Being able to weather that initial weight gain and not be like, screw this, like this is not the opposite of what I wanted is what's happening. Like, why am I paying for this? That kind of attitude. But I can tell you those people that, they struggle to ever complete that recovery diet process, they're the ones that stay stagnant.
Yep.
They're the ones that, I have somebody that I have been working with for well over a year, and a recovery diet was suggested to her by a trainer that she's working with. And all of a sudden now she's like, yeah, let's do this. I was like, this is exactly what I've been trying to do with you for over a year.
Weird.
And you more or less refused to actually
accept that,
to get up to that caloric intake, to the point that I just kind of gave up on it because I was tired of telling you the same thing over and over again.
So what do you think was the message that she heard from this other person?
Who knows?
I think her stagnation finally, like, she has been plateaued for months and months. And I think maybe she finally realized, maybe I need to do something different. I don't know how this conversation went. I could go off on another tangent that it was just right into, she had this conversation and then bumped up caloric intake like immediately in a way that I was like, I've been trying to get you to do this for a year and now you did it in a day.
Yeah, I don't
know what the conversation was or what brought you to a point where you are now ready and willing.
I think a lot of times this comes down to like, sometimes people need to hear it from somebody else. Like they're hearing it from, something from your dad or your mom or whatever.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Then somebody else says it and you're like, Dad, look what I learned today. And you're like,
that was the exact scenario that went through my head. I was like, so the thing that I was trying to do with you from like day one.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, oh, really? Is that? Wow. It's profound, isn't it?
Yeah. What it was, I was like, you know what? I think that's a good idea. I think he was on the ball with what he was suggesting there.
I think part of it too is people getting in these situations, they didn't hear the expectation the way, or they didn't want to hear the expectation they got, but they agreed to it anyway because they're like, I'm paying for this, and I know I need to do this, and they don't realize how much they're pushing back sometimes on the coaching and what they're getting, whether that's like on the fitness floor or in a in a nutrition consult or coaching situation. And sometimes they do need to hear from somebody else. But I think this is the message that I would give to people going back to, like, you're being foolish. This is foolish. This does not make good rational sense. Mm-hmm. And I think people need to hear that. I think coaches need to be a little tougher, and they need to go ahead and put their necks out there and risk. Like what I'm about to tell this person is not going to make them feel good. That what they've been doing is incorrect. Mm-hmm. And maybe what they've been told or what they have in terms of a belief system is flawed. Mm-hmm. And
people don't like that.
People don't like that. And neither do business owners. Neither does a coach. They don't want to make their client feel bad, right? Mm-hmm. I call bullshit. Like, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm trying to give you the truth. I'm trying
from an objective standpoint here. This is
precisely.
Yeah.
And with that objective standpoint, you have to make the decisions to do the things that I can suggest for you. Mm-hmm. But until you get to that point, like, I am just going to be the guy that is telling you the things to do and you're refusing to do them. Yeah. That is very frustrating from the coach's perspective. And so I get where you're coming from. Like, while that's like a huge step forward for your client and maybe even your coaching with her, at the same time you look back and go, what the hell was I not saying right? Yeah. For the last year or whatever, that this person couldn't get this message from me. And again, I think that's a frustration that a lot of coaches have. A lot of times, same as a parent, going back to finally it clicks. And sometimes that also speaks to your patience level as a coach, and just trying to help work them through their journey. Yeah. Sometimes that journey happens in a matter of days, with
sometimes they can
getting to that place. And sometimes it takes a lot longer. Yeah. And I think it often, the light bulb finally goes on when somebody hits rock bottom. Yeah. And the challenge that I've had, particularly lately with a lot of people I talk to kind of on the side, just in all the interactions that I have and all the different things that I do or that we do here, we get into the nutrition conversation and I often avoid it. Because, they'll send me pictures, right? Like, hey, I'm doing great, thanks for the help over here with the workout programs or whatever. And they're looking great. Like they are looking better. right? They have lost some body fat. They are back in the gym. There's more, you can see it in their eyeballs, even in the picture, that there's more vibrancy in this person. And I don't want to take anything away from them when, the message will come in like, hey, I just cleaned up the diet. And I go, well, what do you, like, I'll ask, like, what exactly are you doing? Like, what's going on? I want to know. Well, it's just about eating better and, eating less and
eating clean
meat and vegetables.
Salads.
Okay, great. That's very broad, but okay. But my question always is like, do you have any idea how many calories you're intaking right now? Now, again, going back to these individuals, and you already kind of paint the picture between female and male, generally speaking, this RMR levels, and I get these numbers back and I'm like, whoa, dude. Like, and I've said this before on the show, like, you're at 1,800 calories, dude. You're 6'4" and weigh 240. You're a big man.
Yeah.
Like,
you're under eating stuff.
How are you getting through the day? But here's the thing. What the results are telling them at the time where they're going through this process is that what they're doing is working because they've reduced caloric intake, or they've just changed the macro profile dramatically. They've upped their total daily energy expenditure through exercise. They're getting back into it, and that's really tough to go. Okay, dude, but I want you to pump the brakes, and I want you to pay real close attention to this.
Yeah, make slower progress.
Yeah. Slow it down. Like in the world I live, it's like slow down and get your hits. You don't tell people that. Like, that's not the right thing to tell them, right? No, it's how do you get better at doing the things that you're doing so that you can keep moving forward at the pace that you're moving at, whether that's on the range or in the gym, whether that's with your metabolism, the speed that you're trying to move at, on through your runs, Stephen, or something like that.
There's a saying in ultra running, it's not who's the fastest, it's who slows down the least.
There you have it.
Ends up winning.